You're listening to Just Believe, sponsored by Just Believe Recovery Centers, with your host, Brenda Swift, as she discusses all aspects of addiction, recovery, and sober living. And now, your host of Just Believe, Brenda Swift.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Just Believe Radio. I am your host, Brenda Swift, and we are a show about addiction and recovery and the controversy that goes along with all of the topics included. We are here at 3 p.m. Monday through Saturday and are on 900 a.m., the Talk of the Palm Beaches. The number to call here is 877-309-3635. That's 877-309-3635. And I have a guest in the studio today that's a very important person in my life. I have had the honor of working with Karen or learning from Karen over the years for 18 years now. I have asked her to come in and tell her story about how recovery has affected her life and share her experience with our audience, and hopefully people can recognize a little bit about how they've come to need the process that she's been through and be able to get some help. I would like to introduce Karen.
Hello, Brenda.
Hi. Now, we were going to go a little bit about, just to give a little bit of background, a lot of people believe that alcoholics come from a home that included alcoholism. And a lot of the discussion that we've had so far about the show has been that background. That's my background, of course. And yours was quite a bit different from what we've talked about before.
It was very different. There was no alcohol in my home. I don't think my parents ever bought alcohol. I can remember one time, actually, there was alcohol in our home, and it was my oldest sister had gotten married, and they supplied the liquor for the wedding, and there was leftover, so they brought it home. That's actually my first memory of drinking, sneaking that alcohol out of my parents' pantry. But in my whole life, my parents were married 53 years, and neither one of them ever drank. None of my sisters. There was a lot of us, too. I'm one of 9 children. And as far as I know, I was the only one sneaking the alcohol out of the closet at 13. So I never saw them drink.
But there were other issues going on in the home that made it a more difficult thing to deal with?
Well, there were. You can imagine, with 9 children, 8 girls, there was a lot of probably competition in the family for attention. And I love my childhood. I wouldn't trade it for anything, but at the time, of course, I thought it was a horrible way to grow up because my mother was very strict and my father was the total opposite. And I was always in trouble. I was always the one getting in trouble. And it started in my early teens when I started drinking and sneaking and doing drugs and getting kicked out of school. All of that started then. And I could only, at the time, of course, when you're in your early teens, you're not putting all this together. But looking back on it, it probably did all stem from the inside turmoil I was going through with the attention in my family and my mother so strict.
Right.
Yeah.
So alcohol gave you some relief and changed that for you off the bat?
It sure did. It sure did. When I was 13, I tried for the very first time drinking, smoking, and a pill all the same day.
Okay.
Violently ill.
Off and running. Yes.
Got violently ill, but it was the first experience I had, and I loved it. That was the new thing for me. That was how I was going to live my life.
So at what point then did you know that it was an issue, that there was a problem with it, other than that being your first?
Right. Well, I was probably in my early 20s when I realized that this was not normal. It was not normal behavior. In my early 20s, mid-20s, I realized that probably most people in the world didn't drink scotch out of the bottle in the bathroom. They weren't smoking crack. They weren't going to multiple doctors, getting multiple prescriptions. And every night I would go to bed, I was doing all of these things. And I knew there was a problem. I had no idea how to stop that problem. To be honest with you, there were points, probably toward my late 20s, that I would have rather been dead than to continue living like I was living. But I didn't know how to stop it.
Absolutely. It didn't get to that point overnight, though, as far as there was a lead up to what took you to that volume of substance abuse, right?
Well, I started like I said, in my early teens, drinking, doing drugs, and getting in trouble. By the time I was 28, I'm going to assume is when almost everything just started snowballing.
Okay.
I had, at that point, I didn't have an easy life to that point. I got married very young and divorced very young, and a lot of the adult drinking that I did was basically just to be someone different. I did not want to feel the way I was feeling. I just, in my opinion, in my mind, whether it was true or not, sometimes what we think is what we really believe to be true, and that's not always the case, as you well know. And I had 3 DUIs by the time I was 34, and I always tried to hide the fact. On the outside, Karen's life was perfect. For someone to look at me and watch my daily life, it was perfect. I had a great life. I had a job, a house. I had a beautiful daughter. But no one really knew the real truth. I always hid that.
And for those joining us right now, we are on 900 AM, the Talk of the Palm Beaches. This is Just Believe Radio, and I have my guest Karen in the studio today. Our call-in number is 877-309-3635. And Karen's sharing about the feeling that we're trying to project this image of being perfect to everyone else when we're really in so much pain inside, and that leading to the continuing to increase in volume of alcohol and drugs and that process. And you said you were about 28, married. All things should, for all intents and purposes, it looked like things were perfect on the outside, but it continued to spiral for you at that point, didn't it?
Oh, it did. I had problems. I had problems at work. I had problems at home. I had problems with the law. I have to tell you that it was. It got to the point to where I hid so much I didn't even know who I was anymore. Everybody thought that Karen was fine, and inside I'm dealing with, I thought, major pain at the time. I mean, still going as far back as my early teens growing up. And at this point in my life, I had already been married, divorced. I contribute a lot of the pain, too, to I did have a daughter that passed away when she was a year old, and that was something that perpetuated the adult behavior with drugs and alcohol. The first time I ever had a doctor prescribe me medicine to feel better was the day that she passed away in surgery. And I'm not going to say it took all the pain away, but it was like a wow feeling I had as they were giving me a shot, telling me what had happened to my daughter. And from that point on, that was my major goal, to go to any doctor I could to get that prescription, that particular prescription, because it seemed to have eliminated some of the pain.
Right, some relief from everything
that
was going on. Certainly.
A little bit. And when I look back, Brenda, I do want to tell you, I told you this before, that I had to pull my driving record for a job I was applying for. And when I did pull that record, I looked at the 3 DUIs that I did get, and 2 of those dates were on the day my daughter died, and the third DUI was her birthday. So subconsciously, this is the pain that we as alcoholics and drug addicts try to hide. We don't want to feel this. Sometimes we're totally unaware of what we're doing So subconsciously, these dates are going, they're obviously painful. And those were the DUIs I got, all three of them. 2 on the day she died and 1 on her birthday. So it's a pain we want to hide.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things we do talk about here is that the show is sponsored by Just Believe Recovery, and dealing with trauma and continuing to have the cycles of addiction and the progression and all of the things that we don't really even see. As you said, that it took looking back on those dates to even realize all of that trauma was brought up in the middle of the addiction. For those that are looking for help and would like to talk to somebody, the number is 877-309-3635. And we are going to take a break. I am Brenda, and this is Just Believe Radio. We'll be right back.
At Just Believe Recovery Center, their highly trained staff has a combined 50 years in recovery and is certified to help with each client's individual needs. The program at Just Believe Recovery Center brings those suffering from addiction and their families the understanding needed to begin healing from the devastation and begin the path to a new and fulfilling life in recovery. The staff understands what addiction has done to your family and that no one chooses to become sick. At Just Believe Recovery Center, with a therapeutic process and a caring staff that understands addiction, their clients can choose to become well. Go to justbelieveradio.com for more details and call their 24-hour hotline today, 877-309-3635. That's 877-309-3635 for caring guidance and an end to the pain of addiction now. Just believe there is another chance and call 877-309-3635 today.
Welcome back to Just Believe, sponsored by Just Believe Recovery Centers. To speak with an admission counselor, please call 800-723-7376. And now, your host of Just Believe, Brenda Swift.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is Just Believe Radio. I am Brenda Swift, and I'm here with my guest, Karen. We were talking about, she's sharing her story, which is a very powerful story, about how she's had the ability to get clean and sober and stay that way for 20 years. Karen was telling us about losing her daughter in the middle of what was already addictive behavior that was progressing at that time, and how that trauma came into play with realizing that the legal issues she was getting into, the DUIs, were happening on those dates of those traumas. And as we mentioned before the break, those are the issues that we bury so deeply as addicts and alcoholics that we don't even see that we're trying to run as fast as we can because we don't have the coping skills that we need. And after you found out that those were the dates that were critical for where you're running the hardest, and it was progressing, to such a great extent where it didn't remain manageable. What did you make any changes to realizing, that was the issue, or?
Well, to be honest with you, I didn't realize those dates were the days that I got the DUIs until after I was sober.
Oh, okay.
I had to pull my driving record for a job that I was applying for, but I was already sober at that time.
All right.
And I never put it together. My point is that we can go through our whole lives and bury things so deeply and not even be aware at all how it's actually affecting us because it's so deep. Sometimes we just want to block it out. We say, oh, that's okay. I dealt with it. That was 20 years ago. I'm fine. That was like the basic comment when someone would comment on losing a child. Oh, I'm okay. Thanks for saying you're sorry. But we don't realize until we actually do the work, until we actually get a clear head and start looking back at these things.
And how long had you been sober when you realized that was still the dates that all the DUIs happened on?
Yeah, I was probably 3 or 4 years sober.
Okay.
I applied for a treatment center.
Okay.
And I needed the driving record.
Right?
Yeah.
Did you make any changes at that point in recovery to deal with it, or has it been a continuous cycle for you?
No, I made changes. When I looked at that and I realized, I went right back to therapy, and for a particular reason, and it was to deal with this. I need this brought right up front. I need to deal with it. I need to move on. There's a lot of times throughout my life that I thought everything was fine,
Of course.
and that was one of them. I'm strong. I can deal with it.
At 3 years sober.
Not the case.
No.
We need help.
And that's the gift of the program and the tools that we do have available, is that treatment is part of your story. I've heard your story a number of times, and being able to then see later on that these things are still affecting us, and we have all these tools that we can continue with. What was the actual process of you being able to go to treatment? What did you experience that took you there?
Wow. For me, was necessary. I always said, and I still will say it, that treatment saved my life, and the 12-step program helped me to live that life. I believe wholeheartedly that without treatment, I probably would be dead today. But I don't know. Do you want me to discuss what led to the treatment?
I think that's the most powerful part of your story is how a lot of people don't really realize the extent that we can get to with addiction and still be able to survive it. And that was what's so powerful about your story for me, is getting to just absolute, bottom of your soul kind of lost and still be able to find your way to getting help. And that's what we're hoping that people are able to do here. For those just joining us, again, we're Just Believe Radio. I am Brenda Swift, and I'm here with Karen, who is sharing her experience and what brought her into actually getting the help that we're hoping to connect people to today. Our number is 877-309-3635, and I would love to hear, again, the story that had inspired me to talk to you 18 years ago and bring you into the gift of our relationship. And Karen and I have been very close for 18 years.
A long time now.
Yes, and she's been an integral part of my recovery, and I'm very, very grateful to have her here and share the things that have enabled me to bond with her and hear that you can, no matter how far down the scale we go, you can get help and be able to live a life that's really beyond what we'd ever imagined in recovery.
It's incredible now. The life that I have today is incredible. I'm happier than I've ever been. But let me share one thing. I did not for 1 minute ever think that I was going to be any different than I was when I was in full addiction. I thought I was going to live the rest of my life like that. I was going to die like that. I'll tell you, the very moment I recognized that I was either going to make a decision to stay sober or I was going to die. And I was in the bathroom in probably the height of my addiction. And on the back of the toilet seat, I had a bottle of scotch, a crack pipe, and a bottle of Valium. And I would go in there every 10, 15 minutes, and I would do the thing. The last time that I remember coming out of the bathroom, I walked out the door, and I had glanced to the side, and I saw myself in the mirror. And it stunned me. I stopped. I was shocked. I said, "Who is that?" And I took a step back, and I went back to the mirror. And I got so close to that mirror, it was like touching. And I was staring for the very first time in my life into my own eyes. And actually, I believe I was looking at my soul for the first time. And I could not believe what I was seeing or feeling. And I just looked at myself. I said, "Who are you?" I mean, I was going through this for days at this point, and this was just the end. This was the moment in time that I realized I had to do something. And that something for me, Brenda, was actually to get help. At that moment, I walked out of my bedroom and I went to my daughter, who at the time was 16 years old, and I was honest with her. I figured I need to tell on myself. I need to tell someone what's going on. So I told my daughter what I was doing. And she really surprised me. As you know, she said, "Okay, Mom." And she wrote a phone number. It wasn't her phone number. She wrote a phone number down on a piece of paper. And she said, "When you're ready to get help, call me." And she walked out the door. And I was left standing there. A totally empty mind, soul, everything. I felt nothing. I was just there wondering, what am I going to do? So I immediately went to the phone directory, sat on my bed and went through and looked for every single treatment center I could find in Palm Beach County. And I probably called every one of them. I'm not real clear on how many I called, but I kind of stuck with 2 of them. And it still took about a week after that. But I called them every day. One of them I was calling probably 6 or 7 times a day. And I would ask them questions. How am I going to do this? And what do I do? Who pays for this? And just questions. But this whole week before I actually made the step to go into the treatment center, I was still using. I was going to make this my very last week, hoping I didn't die first. And that's another thing we do. Every night I would go to bed. Well, whenever I went to bed, it wasn't always at night.
Yes.
I would just pray and beg God, please, if you just let me live through tonight, I swear I won't do this tomorrow. I promise you I never will. And I'll be darned. This is where the problem comes in, because we think it's willpower and it isn't. Because I would wake up the next morning and do it all over again. Promising
your own
God.
will.
Exactly. I had no control over it. Well, I suppose picking it up was, my choice. But I was so addicted to drugs and alcohol that I had no idea how to put it down.
At that point, there wasn't any
At that
choice.
point, there was no way.
If you're just joining us now, we are on Just Believe Radio at 900 Talk of the Palm Beaches. The phone number to call for anyone that needs help or wants to ask some questions about the show is 877-309-3635. I have a guest in the studio today that's been a very important person in my recovery, and she has a very powerful story. She's starting to let us know how treatment worked in her story, as well as how she had the ability to actually walk through that kind of fear to be able to get to that point when things had gotten so bad. With Karen, hi.
Hi, Brenda. Thanks so much. Well, after making all of these phone calls, and I was alone in the house, probably for the first time in my life, really feeling that alone. That the alone sensation that nobody wants to be in. It's felt through your whole body, your heart, your soul, your gut. And I would call these treatment centers, and in doing so, they were becoming my friends. They were the people who I was starting to trust. They were answering all my questions. They were walking me through what I needed to do. And I finally chose the treatment center I wanted to go in, and I would tell them, okay, I'll call you tomorrow at 10 o'clock, and we'll discuss how we're going to go about getting me into treatment. And they were so kind to me. They would call back to make sure I was okay. Of course, they knew what I was doing. I wasn't going to leave at that moment, but I had already made the decision.
And this whole time, you're still continuing with the alcohol and substances?
Yes, I was. And in addiction in my life, I never stopped until it was gone.
And we are out of time for today. We're going to continue Karen's story tomorrow, where she gets into the real detail about how everything has worked for her and what got her there. I am Brenda Swift. This is Just Believe Radio. We're here 3 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and we'll be back tomorrow. Tune in.
At Just Believe Recovery Center, their highly trained staff has a combined 50 years in recovery and is certified to help with each client's individual needs. The program at Just Believe Recovery Center brings those suffering from addiction and their families the understanding needed to begin healing from the devastation and begin the path to a new and fulfilling life in recovery. The staff understands what addiction has done to your family and that no one chooses to become sick. At Just Believe Recovery Center, with a therapeutic process and a caring staff that understands addiction, their clients can choose to become well. Go to justbelieveradio.com for more details and call their 24-hour hotline today, 877-309-3635. That's 877-309-3635 for caring guidance and an end to the pain of addiction now.